If you love to go to the movies, if you love to watch movies at home, if you're a great fan of movies, then you will know that the end of the movie is not the end of the film. That when the story is over, the film keeps rolling, and another story is told, that there on the screen is the story of why you were able to watch the movie at all. That's what made the story possible. But hardly anyone knows this, pays any attention, because they're walking up the aisle with their backs to the screen, brushing the popcorn off their laps, or trying to dislodge a bit of gummy bear stuck between their teeth with their tongues as they fumble for their car keys. Or if you're at home, it's the moment you hit the stop button and go to the kitchen for a bedtime snack or start cleaning up, because after all, the movie has ended and you're not really interested in what's rolling by on the screen, even though it's the story of why the movie could be made in the first place. And what is it that appears on the screen? This other story? The list of credits. Rolling by so fast sometimes that even if you did want to read it, you really couldn't, is the list of names of all those who worked on the movie, crafted the film, made the telling of the story possible. Not just the producer and actor and big stars, but all the editors and technicians and assistants, right down to the lowliest gaffer and gopher and grip. Hundreds of names sometimes, hundreds of people, without whom there would have been no movie, no stuff, no story, no big name star pulling down millions. The list of credits tells the story behind the story. A story as important, you could say, as the movie itself. Yet no one notices, pays any attention, because the list comes at the end when people are getting up and turning away. Of course, the film begins with the names of the big stars splashed across the screen, along with the producer and director and maybe a few others, as if to say the stars made it all possible, with just a little help maybe, and to make sure there's no confusion about that. The credits are buried at the end. Wasn't always like this, you know. In the 30s and 40s and even 50s, the credits came at the beginning, leaving no doubt that the story was the work of many people, that no one did it all by himself. You were even informed that the movie was filmed in Technicolor or Panavision, to assure that credit was given to the latest technical wonders of the age, and to assure you, the moviegoer, that you were benefiting from these technical wonders. That list of credits, either at the end or the beginning, tells the truth of the story behind the story. And I got to thinking, if a movie was made of your life, who would be on the list of credits? Who would be listed as the ones making it all possible, who helped you get to this day? Would it be a short list or a long list? Would there be any list at all? And at what point would the list roll? Kind of at the beginning, up front, so as to leave no doubt that you owe much to many? Or at the end, where no one will notice and people will think you did it pretty much all by yourself? Even more to the point, if a movie was made of your life of faith, who would be on the list of credits? Who would you credit for your faith? Anyone at all? I got to thinking about this because of what the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy. He wrote, I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that first lived in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now, I am sure, lives in you. In other words, for Paul, faith was something that was passed along from one generation to the next. Something taught and learned, something that was modeled so that others could see what it meant to have faith. Faith is not something that's gained in an instant nor acquired apart from others. Faith involves, actually, a long list of credits. Of course, that's not the way we usually see it. In today's world, faith is seen as something you get on your own or something given apart from others. So we hear believers talk of having personal experiences that resulted in faith, or talk about how they found Jesus or Jesus found them, but always talk in terms of I, me. Rarely, if ever, do they say we or they. Rarely is mention made of a community of faith, the role others played. The way many believers tell it, it sounds pretty much like a do-it-yourself project, a kind of Home Depot approach to faith, something the believer accomplishes for himself or herself, perhaps with the help of an instruction manual or two. And along with this approach to faith comes the 7-Eleven concept of the church. The church is to be a convenience store for the individual believer to stop by when the believer feels a need to pick up a little something to tide him over. Again, the emphasis on I, me, and there's little connection to the community in terms of faith. So either there's no list of credits or only a very short one, but there's no doubt as to who is the star of the show. But then this is pretty much how people have come to see their lives in general. Something they've made, done all by themselves, a result of their own hard work and personal accomplishments, totally apart from others. Not only are they the stars of the show, but also the producer, director, screenwriter, cameraman, makeup artist, editor, sound technician, and everything else to boot. If any credit to others is given, it rolls by when no one's paying attention. But there's some truth in all of this, of course. I mean, our individual choices and decisions do give shape to our character and lives, of course. And our individual talents and abilities and intelligence and hard work do make a big difference in terms of accomplishments and achievements in business and other areas. And certain individuals do have leadership skills and other qualities that bring success to corporations and other organizations, of course. And yet, there's a deeper truth. Many years ago, the owner of a paving company in Ohio, a company which he himself had started some 30 years before and built up into a huge, huge operation, sold his company for $200 million. What he then did shocked the business community, because what he did was give more than half of it away to his employees. After all, he said, it was their loyalty and their hard work that made the company what it was. And that is the deeper truth, not only of companies, but of all of life. There should be a long list of credits, letting everyone know the story behind our stories. We haven't done it all by ourselves. And when it comes to faith, that certainly is the deepest truth of all. While it is true that no one can believe for us, and we each must claim a faith for ourselves, and at the heart of it all is our individual relationship to God, the deepest truth is that we come to have faith, are put into relationship with God by and through others. Now, while it's true that faith is ultimately a gift, a work of the Spirit, the deepest truth is that the Spirit works through others in our lives to give us the gift of faith. The truth is, we come to faith by hearing the story of God and Jesus as told by others, starting with Scripture. That's a story told by others. And then we hear it told by others in our lives, teachers, pastors, friends, whoever. And we come to faith by learning such things as grace and forgiveness, what those things mean, and hope and servanthood and obedience. and being taught by others how to shape our wants and desires and choices and actions by the gospel of Christ, and seeing in them a model of faith and discipleship. And faith is strengthened in our relationship to God, deepened by others, as they encourage and challenge and confront and guide us. The truth is that it's in community with others, in conversation with others, and in communion with others that faith is born and grows and develops. Faith involves a long list of credits. When I think of my own story of faith, there are so many names that come to mind. Like Timothy, the faith that lives in me first lived in my grandmother Nan. She's the one who began to teach me. And it's a faith that lived in my childhood pastor, a rather kind and gentle man by the name of Alf Romstead. And two teachers at Dartmouth, Robin Scroggs and Rabbi Jacob Newser, both of whom took me under their wings and challenged me, pressed me, encouraged me, and opened me to a much wider understanding of faith. And at the Divinity School at Yale, Julian Hart and Paul Homer showed me what an inquiring, strong faith looked like. A faith that wasn't afraid to think and question and search. A faith that engaged both the heart and mind. And in my first congregation in Nashville, Robert Robb, my friend and guide, and members like Jake Standstill and Matilda Gropp and Reb Johnson helped me understand what faith looks like when it's lived out on the ground, day after day. And in Memphis, Bob Hilliard, Gus Eichel, Bevan Elwood Carlson, and others helped deepen my faith. And many of you are on the list of those to whom I owe so much. And of course, there are the authors I read and with whom I have silent conversations, a whole host of biblical scholars, theologians, and novelists. The list of credits goes on and on. My story is deeply interwoven with their stories. And in a very real sense, it is they who have made my story possible. So, who would be on your list? I think it's a good question to ask ourselves, because it reminds us how much we need each other, need a community of faith. Some years back, I met a woman who started a teen center in the area. And she'd spent years working with all kinds of kids. Kids on drugs, kids not on drugs. Kids who were lost and confused, kids who had it all together. Rich kids and poor kids and everything in between. And as we talked about her work and all the kids faced in today's world, she said this: you know, there is such an emptiness in kids today. Such a terrible void. And it's still true. But the kids aren't the only ones, are they? So many people today are searching to fill the void. And what it should tell us as a community of faith is that now, more than ever, we need to tell the stories of faith, to teach hope and servanthood, to show the way to new purpose and fullness. You know, so much popular theology today is theology only for the good times. When everything is going great, in the face of evil and suffering, however, it crumbles and leaves people with little ability to manage what happened. More than ever, both kids and adults need a theology that has a depth and reality to it, that is a match for all that happens. And both kids and adults need to hear stories and see models of faith and courage and service and self-sacrifice and purpose. Let's face it, the cultural stories of self-interest and greed and the thin theology of self-serving salvation has failed miserably. More than ever, we need communities of faith in which the gospel is told honestly and well, and its power to give purpose and hope is experienced. Now, maybe by this time you've guessed where I'm going with all of this. And it's simply this: if you need a reason to commit yourself to this congregation, to give your time and abilities and resources to the work of this congregation, well, just think of your own story of faith and that long list of credits, and how we need communities of faith in which children and youth and adults come to faith, grow in faith, have their faith rekindled, learn to live with purpose, learn to be Christ to others. I think it's the one true hope for our lives and world, that the stories are told and heard, that relationships to God are deepened, that each of our stories is a story of faith and purpose and love. And so, before we get up today and turn away from the cross and one another and head out the door fumbling for our car keys, let us remember Christ and one another, the story behind our stories, and be committed people through whom the Spirit can work to bring faith to others, faith to this world, hope and purpose and peace.